As you guys know, things have not been going well for Ubisoft. There's been X-Defiant, Assassin's Creed, and the recent rumors of a sale of the studio as a whole to possibly Tencent. But today we've got a video beating everyone's favorite dead horse, which is Ubisoft. Now, as far as this one goes, this is from Legendary Drops, and obviously, just like usual, we haven't watched this one yet. I don't know the exact thing that he's talking about. He said this will be the end of Ubisoft. Could be X-Defiant. That's been recent. I don't actually know what his main point in this is, but let's dive in and find out.
Silence your critics, lie to your fans, double down on poor decisions, ignore feedback. What's that? Oh, this is a big bag of feedback. We don't need that. And then
that was Uber Eats.
Virtue signal
Skip
from your
the dishes.
C-suite office.
DoorDash.
That is the Ubisoft
Guaranteed.
plan for success. That's to get
What did
them
he get to
right
eat?
back
I want to know what he
track.
got to eat.
I am floored. I can't believe it. You know, everything that they've done, every action they've taken, everything that they have said has only dug their grave even deeper. At this point, they're just diving in, and honestly, I can't even really blame them. You know, I had hoped that after all of the bad press surrounding Ubisoft, with the failed launch of Star Wars Outlaws, them pushing back Assassin's Creed Shadows, that they would try to figure out ways to be able to trend in the right direction.
Then X-Defiant
I thought
happens.
to myself, why would they do that? I mean, come on. Now we have industry analysts that are predicting that Ubisoft is going to go private and then sell off their biggest IPs. And to be honest with you, they're probably not very far off.
Sell off that actually could be good.
A lot has happened with Ubisoft since we last talked about them. And at this point, their graceless downfall has turned into nothing but pure cinema. Ubisoft, once a titan of the gaming industry, is now a cautionary tale of what happens when a company loses touch with its audience, its vision, and becomes so top-heavy that their only recourse is to squeeze their customers for all they're worth. This is a story that we have chronicled before, a company plagued by scandals, internal dysfunction, and creative stagnation. In my video, the complete and utter collapse of Ubisoft.
Here's their stock. Their highest peak was in 2021, so COVID, kind of. And that's 82 euros. They're at 12 euros right now. Holy jeez.
We retraced all of their obsessions with their annualized franchises like Assassin's Creed, Rainbow Six, and Far Cry. Once their crown jewels, now their Achilles heel. By recycling mechanics, churning out uninspired titles, becoming increasingly more predatory with their monetization, and refusing to innovate, Ubisoft alienated their once loyal player base that could no longer stomach mediocrity. But their problems weren't just creative, they were systemic. As I pointed out, in Ubisoft lost more than they're worth, the company has been hemorrhaging money, losing key developers and chasing trends instead of setting them. They gambled on live service games and large projects that nobody asked.
I think we are going to look back at live service and be like, this is what killed so many studios and so many developers.
In the games like the long-delayed Skull and Bones, a game that has now become an industry punchline. They lost it all on Star Wars Outlaws, only selling 1 million copies.
Which I heard was actually a somewhat decent game.
With a release on Steam. And they've closed the studio behind Prince of Persia: The
Lost
Crown,
actually a good
arguably
game.
the best game that they've had in recent times, just because they overcharged for it.
Eesh.
Add to that workplace scandals and allegations of toxic leadership, and it's no
there it
surprise
is.
that
That's what we just looked at.
Ubisoft has seen waves of talent departures and plummeting investor confidence. Despite the warning signs of their games failing to reach audiences, Ubisoft seemed unwilling or unable to change. They clung to outdated design philosophies and tone-deaf marketing strategies, prioritizing shareholder appeasement over player satisfaction while accomplishing nothing. Literally nothing. And while other companies in the industry have found ways to pivot or regain their footing, Ubisoft has dug their heels in, spiraling further into irrelevance. Fast forward to today, and the cracks in the foundation.
They had the Division. They had the Division. That was probably one of their, like, that peak. No, not that one. Their Division would have been before their peak. So, okay, never mind. Division was a long time ago.
Have split wide open. The struggles that we've talked about before are no longer cracks in their armor. They are gaping wounds. Just recently, Ubisoft announced the closure of 2 studios, another devastating blow to their workforce and morale. And then there's
honestly, okay, I'm going to say this and then I'm going to leave this alone, but this is something that I tweeted out recently. I want a good looter shooter. Like Destiny, like when Destiny 1 came out, a lot of people may not know this, but this channel, the best month I ever had on this channel was when Destiny 1 came out. I pivoted, like, not on the main channel, on this channel. I started putting Destiny 1 guides out. I love that game. And they did extremely well. I think some of my top viewed videos on this channel are still Destiny 1 videos. And I love looter shooters. And I would love a Call of Duty looter shooter. I would just love a good looter shooter. And like, I know like Borderlands 4, like, I don't mean like that. I mean like almost MMO-esque first person shooter, something like that. And I know the games industry has gone in form of extraction shooters, and yeah, you could work that in there. And I know Modern Warfare Zombies was kind of like that, but a good one. I want a good one.
X-Defiant, a game that was supposed to show that Ubisoft could still compete in the realm of military shooters, instead becomes yet another entry in their growing list of failures. Juice Van Duren, business professor and former CEO and co-founder of Superdata Research, a games marketing research company, is predicting that Ubisoft is headed for privatization and dismantling in 2025. He's probably right. Saying, with the share prices plummeting from $28.19 to $12.30 year over year, the company has become an attractive takeover target. Its valuable assets, particularly Rainbow Six Siege and the Assassin's Creed franchise, could be worth more separately than together. Now, something I want to be crystal clear on is that Ubisoft is essentially powerless. In the videos that I had made previously, I was just basically stating that the Titanic had hit the iceberg. They were already taking on water. The ship was sinking. Their only options right now are to save their valuables and try to salvage what's left. That's the position that they're in right now. You know, in a lot of cases, we talk about how difficult it is for some of these really top-heavy companies to be able to turn things around because it takes a while for them to do so. But we don't ever get to study a company that can't turn around. And that's the position that Ubisoft is in. And honestly, that's what makes this so fascinating. You know, when I had made the video talking about how Ubisoft had lost more than they're worth, I meant it. Truly, I meant it. They have had too many games that they've released that came out to subpar reception or failed completely, and they spent way too much money on it. And on top of that, the company has too many employees to support.
Yeah, okay.
People even understand that this company has over 20,000 employees working for them. They are massive. When you're making as much money as they are right now, that is not enough to support that many people. I mean, even if Assassin's Creed Shadows,
we've done this briefly with
let's say 5 million copies. That's a conventional success in gaming. That's not too bad. That would cover their.
Okay. What are we gonna go for a wage of 70,000? So you take $70,000 a year. We'll say that's American times 20,000 employees. This is just employment costs. That's how many zeros are we looking at? There's 100, a million, tens of millions, hundreds of millions. Is that right? 1.4 billion a year in developer costs. Is that correct? That's yep. Okay. See the problem?
Their development costs and marketing costs, and then outside of that, not really a whole lot else.
That doesn't include marketing.
They would need a Baldur's Gate 3 or Elden Ring level of success. We're talking 10 plus million copies sold for them to make a profit on this game. And then still, it's not going to cover up any of the mistakes that they've made with their other games. With all of the money that they've invested into.
This is even wrong what he's saying. Because like just numbers wise, unless I did that math horribly wrong, which is completely possible. Like let me just do that again. $70,000, and maybe that's a little high for an average salary, times 20,000 employees. That's 400, right? 400 million. Yeah, that's 1.4 billion. Okay, so let's say if you have a 10 million copy selling game, right? 10, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's 10 million, right? 10 million, yeah. Times $70. That's only $700 million. That is half of just the development cost, not marketing costs, for that one game. Now, I get all 20,000 employees aren't working on one game, but they would essentially need 2 Baldur's Gates or 2 Elden Rings to just make up 1 year development cost of their employees. Yikes.
To Skull and Bones or Star Wars Outlaws or anything else for that matter.
Am I doing that math wrong?
Keep in mind that their
Someone
next
tell me
games
whether
to
or
release
not I'm
after
doing that
this
math
are
wrong.
much, much further down the road. We're talking years that they're going to have to survive on that money. Assassin's Creed Shadows is not going to sell that much.
Maybe 3-4 million.
For Ubisoft to be able to patch the hole and get to shore, it's an impossible task. They're not going to be able to do it. But if they did, it would be one of gaming's biggest turnarounds.
We love a comeback story.
We
love a comeback story.
Strong leadership. But in this case, the captain is just heading for the next iceberg.
No, not even heading for the next iceberg.
Ubisoft,
he's trying to figure out how he can make money off of this.
Shadows and the failed launch of Star Wars Outlaws, you would think that the company would try to remain low profile, not make any waves, and not do anything to rock the boat any further. Disregarding all sense of caution, common sense, and reality for that matter, Ubisoft launched Champions Tactics Grimoria Chronicles, a tactical turn-based player versus player RPG. The gameplay markets as tactical play to win. This NFT game would see you buy and sell character pieces, earning cryptocurrency in the game that you could then turn into heroes, and then you could sell that for real money. The common line of garbage that we normally get with these kind of games, or at least what they try to sell to their coped out audiences.
I didn't know about this.
But Ubisoft was selling characters for upwards of $63,000. And to the dismay of many playing the game in true Ubisoft fashion, it was broken at launch with claims of cheaters and exploiters. While Ubisoft tiptoed around their NFT game, Ubisoft's head of Assassin's Creed Shadows held back nothing when it came back to tackling the ongoing discussions about forced representation and the influence of diversity, equity, and inclusion in video games. This has been a major point of contention for potential players and fans of Assassin's Creed, as this is the first game
Assassin's Creed, by the way.
Japan. A fitting setting for the franchise,
We're
where the
going to do
game's
it.
main protagonist
What day does that
is
come
Japanese.
out? Is it to
Assassin's
Valentine's
Creed
Day?
boss Mark Alexis Cote responded to player pushback saying, Assassin's Creed has always been about exploring the full spectrum of human history, and by its very nature, that history is diverse. Staying true to history means embracing the richness of the human perspective without compromises. For example, in Assassin's Creed Shadows, we highlight figures both fictional like Naoe, a Japanese woman warrior, and historical like Yasuke, the African-born samurai. While the inclusion of a black samurai in feudal Japan has sparked questions and even controversy, Naoe, a fictional character, has also faced scrutiny for her gender. But just as Yasuke's presence in Japanese history is fact, so too are the stories of women who defined societal expectations and took up arms in times of conflict. Holy gaslight, Batman. I don't think I've seen anybody strawman this hard. I don't think I've seen any backlash regarding Naoe. A Japanese female ninja is pretty fitting for a setting like this. And I'll be honest with you, if she was the main and only protagonist, I don't think people would be complaining nearly as much. I personally do not understand the inconsistency of the messaging here. First, you want to say it's rooted in history, then you want to say it's fiction, then you want to say you want to make a fictional character historic. I just don't understand why you keep trying to justify it. Why don't you just say we made Yasuke because, well, we thought it would be...
Here's how you fix this problem. This is a fictional game with some roots in history. End of story. We made a story that we thought was good. Stop trying to
entertaining, and it's what we wanted to make, rather than making it sound like it's some type of noble cause. First, they claim the game is rooted in history, yet pivot to emphasizing fictional elements while defending their creative choices. Then they blur the lines even further by trying to represent a fictional character, Naoe, as a part of some broader historical narrative. It's as if they're trying to have it both ways, asserting historical authenticity when it suits them while falling back on fiction when it doesn't. If the decision to include Yasuke was genuinely creative or thematic, then why not just own it? Say we wanted Yasuke because we thought it added something unique to the story. That would make it feel far more honest than trying to dress it up as some noble endeavor to try to highlight diversity. The over-justification doesn't reinforce the decision. It just makes it feel disingenuous, as though they're anticipating the backlash rather than simply standing for their creative vision. Cote would go on to further justify their actions, saying, this echoes the selfless bravery of our Assassin's Creed protagonists. They fought for freedom, knowledge, and the right to chart their own paths, just as we do as creators. fight to tell stories that matter in a world that grows increasingly divided. As the authors of How Democracies Die so powerfully stated, democracies crumble when good people decide to stay silent. The same is true, I think, of our creative freedom when we allow fear to stifle our voice.
As the Dalai Lama said, nobody cares.
When we self-censor in the face of threats, when we hand over our power piece by piece until freedom and creativity both wither away.
Like, how sad, how pathetic do they sound?
Let that happen. It's time for us creators to stand firm in our commitment to our values by telling stories that inspire, that challenge and help people to connect. Our silence cannot become complicit. This man deserves an Emmy. I am dying here. Please help. Kote is suggesting that criticism or backlash is akin to self-censorship, implying that questioning their creative choices is the same as threatening their freedom to create. But criticism is not censorship. Players are pointing out inconsistencies, questioning decisions, and expressing dissatisfaction for a product that they're expected to pay for, and that's not an existential threat to your creative freedom. It's feedback. Treating critique as a form of oppression is not only disingenuous, but it's actively dismissing the audience's role in this process. Yep. The invocation of How Democracies Die is especially egregious. It conflates real-world political and social crisis with the act of creating entertainment products. It's appealing to authority using the weight of academic work to justify your inclusion of specific characters or narratives in a damn video game. But the game is not democracy, nor is it a battleground for your lofty ideals. It is a product designed for entertainment and for sale. And that's where the root of player concerns are right now. This is a product designed to be purchased for entertainment, and this is what you want to use it for. And then when we find out that this game is reportedly being worked on by a staff comprised of people who nearly half of them have never even made a game before.
Oh, really?
Some of them believing that it is the worst game ever, and your only response to players' concerns is your nobility.
I haven't heard that
and the
report.
Belief that you're some freedom fighter? It only helps to prove that this game, regardless of its delay, will have Yasuke being the least of players' concerns. Yeah. They're burying the lead. When I see a developer that is this wrapped up in their own social politics, I see it as a mining canary, that they are ignoring what they need to be paying attention to, which is making sure that they're making a game that players are actually going to enjoy. They're not paying attention to gameplay. They think they're writing a stage play. And I think that's what has a lot of players, a lot of customers that are...
Hold up. We played Indiana Jones, and that game was almost a stage play. And it was good. It was damn good. But the gameplay was good, right? The puzzles were good. The story was good. It was a good game, right?
Are genuinely upset and sick of a lot of these studios and many of their executives.
Streaming the game, a lot of you said, I'm going to watch you play this game because this type of like story narrative driven game isn't my cup of tea. It is mine. It is straight up mine. And like the Telltale games things, I love it.
This kind of speech that Kote is using only serves to alienate the players even further, because he's taking the conversation to a moral high ground that is so high the elevation is likely to make you sick. Players are not rejecting creativity, diversity, or meaningful storytelling. They are pushing back against pretension. And their critiques of a product being compared to assaults on fundamental freedoms. I think that's the most frustrating part about all of this, is that it's so easy to see that community concerns, player concerns, customer concerns are being purposefully ignored. This is patented intellectual dishonesty. And because of that, the players and the customers feel disrespected. And this is just a piece of advice that I'm going to give. But when players feel that way, they're not going to buy your games. I don't think that I've ever seen a company so thoroughly and completely
with their heads up their own ass
themselves as much as Ubisoft has. And they're good at it. And that's just the state of the company today. Now, following the abysmal launch of Star Wars Outlaws, the game reportedly only captured 1 million copies sold. In an act of self-inflicted financial devastation, the company has chose to stay true to its plans to continue to support the game with more updates, reworks,
which is
and
interesting.
Changes. In an interview with Games Radar, Julian Garrity, the creative director, said, "I'm a little disappointed with the Metacritic. Recognition from the critics is very important to us, but I do think that players are really connecting with what we did. We had a very
so they're just saying, yeah, you know what, the reviews don't matter.
Ambitious target. We literally reached for the stars, and I think that we were successful from so many different angles. There's a magical, unique experience within Outlaws, whether it's Star Wars or not." Now, I want to pause there for a moment before I continue, because worrying about the critics is exactly what got Ubisoft into the position it's in today. As I go throughout this interview, they mostly end up talking about how they're still working hard on the game's story expansions as well as improving the base game. However, I can't help but feel as though this is just an exercise in futility more than anything else, and they would be better off refunding players who bought the Season Pass content and just cutting ties with the game. I wish that companies would stop being so ambitious about the future of their game and focus on the present. What is the point of committing yourselves to future plans if you have no idea whether or not players are going to even play your game in the first place? When Elden Ring was announced, I don't think that there was any mention of additional content that would come in the future. While there were hints and assumptions, we never got confirmation until after the game had released and garnered success. There's wisdom in that. I mean, Ubisoft announced back in September that Massive, the studio behind Star Wars Outlaws, would be moving over to start work on Division 3, the series that studio is loved for, which has already gone into pre-production. From my perspective, given the sales of Star Wars Outlaws and its tepid reception when it released on Steam, wouldn't it be a better idea to go all hands on deck?
Here's the issue, right? Ubisoft is in a position where they're not going to have enough money to continue with the development of Division 3. It is going to get released early in a state that is not good, and it's going to lose its player base almost immediately, and it'll never be the game that it could have been. Now, is that confirmed? No, but just based off of what they do,
that you know players want, and you know that studio has the most experience with, it just doesn't make any sense, not from a customer perspective or from a business perspective. However, lately, Ubisoft isn't known for having the brightest ideas. I mean, they just convinced themselves that Skull and Bones is a worthwhile investment, and they are telling players in the media that they will turn it around in the next season. Which, now that I think about it, that sounds oddly familiar. Ubisoft.
So how did XDefiant get shut down and Skull and Bones is still there? Is it because you have to pay to play it?
To reassure players and the industry that, contrary to popular belief, one of their games is actually healthy and has a bright future. Oh, wait, that's right. XDefiant.
Yeah, there it is.
Just a few months ago, Mark Rubin, the head of XDefiant, wrote a blog post and a summary of their year one roadmap for the game. And in it, he took the time to take on Insider Gaming's claims that the game was living on borrowed time. Rubin had said, "I just want to quickly address the status of the game, i.e., is the game dying? No, the game is absolutely not dying. We know that there are things we need to improve, like netcode and hit registration and adding more content to progression, but the game is doing well. We just wanted to do better, and we do that by addressing the concerns of the community, which has always been the plan. Ubisoft is very much behind us and has allocated more resources to the team in order for us to do that." Only for 2 months later for Mark Rubin to go on Twitter and announce that XDefiant will shut down and services will end on June 3rd, 2025. But
Skull and Bones is still there somehow.
Rubin goes on to talk about how the game was a passion project, how difficult it is to get a live service game off the ground, and more. What I find really interesting is this section where Mark says, "If there's something I hope we can take away from this experience, it's the importance of open, honest communication between developers and players. The player-first mentality, along with respectful, non-toxic conversations between developers and players, has been one of the standout differences that made XDefiant so special. From my first post about XDefiant, this was the vision I wanted to champion. I hope it leaves a positive mark on how the games industry treats its players and communities." Yet, none of that ever actually happened. There was no honest communication or a player-first mentality when it came to XDefiant or any other Ubisoft game for that matter. While the game had issues, serious core issues with netcode and hit registration, two things that are quite literally the backbone of a first-person shooter experience, that didn't stop Ubisoft from adding more microtransactions or season passes.
So from what I understand, the microtransactions really weren't that bad in XDefiant. Like there wasn't not even close to Call of Duty, and it was a free to play game.
The money printer
so I don't know
kept
if that
printing
I don't know if
while
that's
the issues
true.
kept pushing players out of the game. While Ubisoft plans to refund the players that had purchased the Ultimate Edition of the game and auto-refunded microtransactions that were purchased within the last month, there are still plenty of players that are left hung out to dry. I think that this is the crux of the whole issue with Ubisoft and many other companies. They're so
I don't know if
caught
I
up
agree
in
with
their
this
own
part with
personal
XDefiant.
identity politics, personal politics, actual politics, social politics, and all the different ways that they can make...
The best take I have seen with XDefiant is someone commented on one of my videos and said the problem with XDefiant is it took all of these Ubisoft IPs, a lot of which are failing or have failed, and they took all of these and put them into one game, which meant that you had all of these cool IPs in one game, but it had no personality. It didn't have its own vibe. It didn't have its own story. It didn't have its own footing. It just had all of the footings from these other games, a lot of which have already failed. And I'm like,
make money off of games that they have lost
take.
sight of the fact that they are providing a service and a product to customers. Technical and quality issues, or even just the vision of a well-made game and game that players will actually enjoy, is eclipsed by how they can commoditize, monetize, and use their games as a soapbox. While I definitely think that there's a problem with egos within the industry, I think that this mentality with a lot of these companies is born from the fact that they're publicly traded. They have fiduciary responsibilities. They need to make money for their investors. But I also think that it's a symptom of a much larger issue. Too much investment and too much inorganic growth. Many of the biggest publishers and studios in the industry are now incentivized by the sheer size of their organization and the number of their employees to make their games more expensive, to fill them with microtransactions, and to create things of lower quality. They need to make as much money as they possibly can for a minimum viable product just to be able to keep their heads above water. They can't take creative risks. They can't create niche experiences. They can't make games that have their own identity because they need everybody to be interested in that game. They can't remove or limit monetization because, well, they need as much money as possible. So they bloat their single player games with useless content to urge casual players to buy solutions in the form of microtransactions for problems that they created. Ubisoft as a company is a case study for this industry and where it is headed. They aren't alone in this issue. They're not alone in this race. And while games media and CEOs will happily blame toxic gamers for the issues of these companies or say that the reason why games are failing is because of steep competition, they deny reality the same as Ubisoft. Your games are boring, they're buggy, repetitive, and too expensive. We don't need you, but you need us. Ooh. And that becomes more apparent by the day as we see more games fail and more studios close. Remember who you're working for, or you might not be working much longer. You know, something that I've noticed, and I'm sure a few of you guys have seen this as well, is that art styles, themes, colors, characters, stories, even music at times has started to kind of blend together with some of these games. However, the most popular games, the games that have gotten some of the best sales and some of the best player feedback and retention and all that good stuff, player appreciation, customer appreciation, are games that are incredibly distinct. If I look at like Elden Ring or Baldur's Gate or Path of Exile 2 or any of these games, they end up standing out.
No. Okay, I disagree with a couple of those. Baldur's Gate and Path of Exile. Path of Exile looks like Diablo. Baldur's Gate, I'll give you. But like Path of Exile, I think bad example. But like Metaphor, Astrobot, like look at all the Game of the Years. Balatro, all very different looking, sounding, playing games.
Out because they just don't look like or play like or sound like anything else that's out there. But if I take a game just as an example, like Dragon Age, and I rip off the EA and the BioWare logo, and then you tell me who made that game, Epic, Activision.
I know it's not Activision, but
like they all start to look the same after a while.
Kind of though. Yeah.
I think it's because they're all just chasing each other's tails.
And a lot of them are.
That's really all it ends up being.
Engine.
They look to see what the other big company is doing, and they say, "Oh, we're going to do that too," and that's their big, great idea that they
like. There was a time when all these studios were using different engines. Right?
Bring forth to their boards.
I think that's another
in the pursuit
untalked about thing
of growing. They lost their identity. And it made them unable to stand out in front of other studios and other games. And as a result, they needed to make even more money, but they then continued to hire people. And as their companies grew larger and they had more money, well, then they needed to monetize their games and price their games higher. So what are you left with? You're left with overpriced, over-monetized, and boring games that fail to stand out amongst the rest of the competition out in the market
100%
right now.
he's right there.
That's why games are failing. That's why you're not making any money. That's why the games that you're putting out aren't finding an audience, because there's other games that stand out much better, are much more original, and value our time and money in a way that you just don't anymore. And it's also because you can't, because it really does come down to just how big these companies are. They don't have time to think about what the customer needs. They can only think about what they need right now. And fact of the matter is, you just don't have what it takes to be able to compete in a creative industry anymore, because this cold corporate approach just doesn't work here. Simple as that. You're selling products based on people's wants, not their needs. You can't just do anything you want to what you're selling to us. That's just not how this works.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. Let's put a little metaphor into that one. You're selling based off of what people want. This is not something like healthcare where people need it to survive. They want to play these games, which means if it's a want, they can be a little bit more picky with it. If you say you need insulin, well, you got to buy insulin to survive. You don't need to buy Assassin's Creed to survive. You want a good game. And because it's a want, you can be a little bit more picky.
Ubisoft has taken too many L's. They've had too many games that have failed, and they don't have enough games to give a positive outlook, not only for their investors, but just in general for keeping the company afloat, keeping your employees paid. Because if we actually sit back and look at every single game that they've failed on and how much those games cost them, well, that's all going on the background against any of the games that actually have succeeded, which is basically none for quite a while now, outside of Valhalla, and that was back in 2018, 2020 or 2019, something right around there. It's been a few years since then, and it's not enough money to float all of the poor decisions that they've made. Nor is what is it called? Rainbow Six. Rainbow Six isn't making enough money to be able to keep the entire company afloat. I brought it up earlier in the video. They have over 20,000 employees.
We looked at the numbers
all around the world. And even though people in games media are like, they've laid off 300 employees, and it's just like, they have 20,000. Like,
there's gonna be a
how
lot
are you
more
paying
layoffs
for that? No wonder your investors are leaving. They're like, there's just no way that this company is going to be able to backpedal out of this.
We looked at the numbers.
Their only choice, literally, their only choice is to go private and then sell their IPs. So I'm saying their only choice. I'm saying the owners. That's the only thing the owners can do to be able to make money for themselves, because honestly, that's likely the road that they're going to end up wanting to take. I would imagine that Tencent is probably on the opposite side of that, where they don't want the company to shut down. They want to keep it up. They want to keep the employees there because they want to make the games. And they probably think that they could do a better job.
They think they can turn it around.
Getting the company to produce at the level it should be producing at.
Which it's Tencent.
You take that however you want. I know people have a lot of thoughts on Tencent.
Yeah.
I get it. I'm not really a huge fan of corporate takeovers, but to be honest with you, a lot of the companies that Tencent
they gotta do better than Ubisoft's doing.
Has their fingers in don't really perform all that badly. So I don't know. This is just ridiculous. I can only predict
Tencent has their
that there will be more
Call of Duty a
videos
little bit.
at one point in time. I'm not sitting here trying to farm these guys every single day. I don't really want to do that. I just wait until there's enough to talk about. This is more than I thought I was going to end up having to talk about. Pure cinema. This is too good. Good eating, my friends. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did enjoy the video, like the video, subscribe to the channel. You guys.
I agree with almost everything that he's saying. Some of the things in regards to I don't know, X-Defiant, things along those lines, I don't know. I don't think the microtransactions were that crazy in that game. I think they went for the most publicly viable game possible, right? They wanted to do the opposite of Call of Duty. They wanted to be free to play. They wanted all their microtransactions to be cosmetic only, which they didn't end up being, let's be clear. And they wanted minimal microtransactions. They wanted people to buy it. And they needed, essentially what Ubisoft needed was a gacha game. And what they got was a less popular, less monetizable version of Call of Duty that was falling apart. So that didn't work for them. And then all of these decisions that they have made have gone down and down and down to the point where, man, let me just end off with this. If they are selling their IPs, if they are selling Assassin's Creed, if they are selling Far Cry, if they are selling The Division, if they're selling these IPs, which studios would you like to see buy them? If you got this far in the video, I would love to hear that take. I know it's like 35 minutes in here, but I would love to hear that take. Love to know what you guys think about it. But for now, that's what we know. That's what's coming of it. And we will see what happens next. 2025 is going to be a weird year for video games. Let's put it that way.